This is the Holy Gospel according to Luke. When Jesus said to the disciples, there was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought against him. Were brought to him that this man was squandering his property. So he summoned him, and he said to him, "What is this that I hear about you? Give me an accounting of your management, because you cannot be my manager any longer." Then the manager said to himself, "What will I do now that my master is taking the position away from me? I am not strong enough to dig, and I am ashamed to beg. I have decided what to do so that when I am dismissed as a manager, the people will welcome me into their homes." So summoning his master's debtors one by one, he asked the first, "How much do you owe my master?" And he said, 100 jugs of olive oil. And he said to him, "Take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it 50. Then he asked another, "And how much do you owe?" And he replied, 100 containers of wheat. He said to him, "Take your bill and make it 80. And his master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted so shrewdly. For the children of this age are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than the children of the light. And I tell you, make friends for yourselves by means of dishonest wealth, so that when it's gone, they may welcome you into the eternal homes. Whoever is faithful in a very little is faithful also in much. And whoever is dishonest in very little is dishonest also in much. If then you have not been faithful with dishonest wealth, who will trust to you the true riches? And if you have not been faithful with what belongs to another, who will give you what is your own? No slave can have two masters, for a slave will either hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth." This is the gospel of the Lord. Please be seated. When I was young, very young, 8, 9, 7, 8, 9, I grew up in the church, went to church, and Lutheran church in Detroit, and trying to understand God, that type of thing. And at some point, I really came to believe. And I think part of it was a mixture of being in church, but part of it was, I think one night, I looked at the sky, looked at the stars, looked at the majesty of it all, and somehow I realized in the pit of my soul that God was behind all of this. There was kind of an intuition, about God, and I started to believe in God. I don't know, I was 6, 7, 8 years old, something like that. But and then after a few more years, I picked up a Bible. Not that we didn't have Bibles around, or I hadn't picked them up before, but now on my own, I'm picking up a Bible and trying to make sense of it. And, I'd pick it up, and it was very discouraging. All these names that I couldn't pronounce, it didn't make any sense. Tried to read a little bit of it and get a headache, put it down. And then a few weeks later, maybe I'd pick it up again and thumb through the pages and try to make sense of it. And then I started looking at the maps at the back of the Bible. And that was even more confusing because, again, they were names of places I had never heard of. The same geography, 8 or 9 different maps, depending on whatever. It didn't make any sense to me. I didn't have a whole lot of, I don't know, it didn't work. So I put the book down again. Then I picked it up again, and I decided to look at the list of the names of the books of the Bible. And I'm looking down the list of the, and I'm in the Old Testament. All of a sudden, 2 books they pop out at me. One was Joel, and the other was Amos.
And I'm looking at these names, and to be honest with you, why they popped out of me was I thought they sounded cool. I liked the sound of the name, Joel and Amos. I don't know, it just kind of sounded cool. Secondly, I could pronounce them. What a feature, you know, and they were simple names. So that was really a cool thing. So I like Joel. I think I like Joel and Amos. Didn't know anything about them, but I liked them. And then I found out they're very short books, which is another terrific feature. Easy names, short books. How good can it get? Well, then I opened up the book of Amos, and the balloon burst. I mean, this guy is as serious as a heart attack. I mean, he's not the kind of guy you would want to have over for a grill or something. Just a really stiff, brooding kind of guy, so I closed the book. But many years later, I did ask the question of myself. I asked, what about Amos? So what really is Amos all about? And that's what we're going to talk about today. Amos, I don't know if we don't have that. Okay. Amos was, he survived, he lived 750 years before Jesus. And he was in a region called Judah. The land of Palestine, 750 years before Jesus, there was a southern kingdom and a northern kingdom. Amos lived in the southern kingdom called Judah, and he lived like 10 or 11 miles south of Jerusalem. This is where he lives, okay? And Amos is, he's an agro-capitalist. He's a very wealthy guy. He has lots of herds, and he also has sycamore fig groves, lots of them. And so he has a lot of land, a lot of wealth. He's not trained to be a prophet per se. He doesn't come from that lineage, but he is given a message to deliver. As a wealthy guy from Judah, he has a message to deliver to Israel, which is to the north. That's the northern kingdom. And why Amos is so important to us and our faith is, first of all, in our faith, when we try to unpack it and live into it today and throughout time, we continue to look at this issue called Shalom, this energy force called Shalom, compassion, mercy, justice, and forgiveness. This is the fruit of the church. This is the fruit of people of faith. And so we look at these things, and Amos uniquely focuses in on the issue of justice. So that's what he is contributing to the Shalom. And when we talk about justice, we talk about calling out the injustice that happens to people who are in severe poverty, who have been oppressed, who have worked extraordinarily hard for little in return, who have enriched others, who have, in a sense, enslaved them. And this issue of justice is this, that the Creator is totally not happy with people being poor and people being rich, and you have this disparity. This is not in God's plan. We are to lift one another up. And interestingly enough, he gives this message to a very wealthy agro-capitalist 750 years before Christ in Judah. So Amos takes the message north into Israel. And he settles about 12 miles north of Jerusalem. So he travels about 25 miles north. And he settles in Israel. And Israel was experiencing at that time an economic boom. Life was good in Israel. If you were rich, it was great. But if you were poor, not so good. But in the end, the wealth of Israel was significant at this time. Amos is called to preach out about injustice. And he says to the people of Israel, the way you are treating the poor is thoroughly unacceptable. The way you treat women is unacceptable. You cannot continue this lifestyle as a society and expect it to be sustainable. At some point, this thing breaks down. It's not right that people should suffer so much at the hands of the wealthy. And he says it's all going to come down. It's all coming down. And he says, think about it. Assyria, huge kingdom, infinitely larger than Israel and Judah combined. It's big. It's the big bad wolf. It is northeast of Israel, and they're coming. They're going to walk over you. Do you understand that? Your only hope is to join together and become a community. Because you see, Assyria wanted to get to Egypt. Israel was in the way. It was a trading partner. Egypt and Assyria. So, Israel was in the way. And you're not going to stand. You're not going to make it. It's not going to work. This kingdom will end. And then finally, Amos says, last piece. He says, you guys, you pray. You go to the synagogue, temple. You go, you pray. You tithe. You make sacrifices. You have your prayer. You have your songs. And then you treat people poorly. And he says, do you really think God fell off the back end of a turnip truck? This is not the way to live. It's not acceptable. It would be better if you didn't pray. It would be better if you didn't give. It'd be better if you didn't sacrifice and simply go out and care for the community. This was the message of Amos. And theologians over time who have evaluated Amos have recognized the fact is that our faith, if it's rightly charged, requires this issue of justice. And sometimes we think that politics and religion don't mix, but the reality is they always have mixed, always, forever. They've never not mixed. The reality is our faith in Shalom requires us to take that faith out into the world and to be aware of the needs of others and how our actions impact that. So today, I think where we're at with all this is to put ourselves in Amos's shoes, to recognize that we have whatever we have, and to begin to imagine and reimagine the fact that there are lots of people in the world who are in fact suffering, and to think about how is it that I may play a role in making a difference in the life of the other. This is the ultimate challenge of the church today, to pay attention to pain and suffering, to recognize that we have the capability to do something about it, and sometimes to be that voice, the voice of Amos that calls out into the world around him. This message is not the easiest message to hear, but it's one of the messages that we need to allow ourselves to take in and to be mindful of and reflective about and to think about, God, what would you have me do? Amen.